Hello, everybody. Good morning for 2 more minutes on the East Coast, and good afternoon for people who are in later time zones. We are just getting ready to get started. We're going to probably get started in about 2 or 3 minutes. We should have just launched a poll. So as people are filtering in, there's a poll. We welcome you to go ahead and fill that out. It's a question around how you currently determine your content marketing. So if you're extremely sophisticated, that's great. We're going to have stuff here for you. If you don't create much content today, we're going to have some stuff for you there too. So please take a moment. We'll get started in about a minute or two. The other thing I'd like to do is we are using this as a very interactive, question-heavy webinar, as all of our webinars are. So we are going to be using the question tab quite a bit. So if you guys can go in, you guys and gals can go see the question tab. If somebody wants to do me a favor, there's quite a few people in. If somebody could do me a quick favor and just ask any question you'd like about content marketing. Maybe a question can be something around what you'd like to get out of today's webinar. So if you have a question that's relevant to your business or you think might be interesting to get an answer, please go ahead and fill that out. Again, we're going to be getting started in about 1 or 2 minutes. The couple of things that people can do is, number one, there should be a poll on the screen that asks you how you're currently determining your content marketing plan. And then the second thing I would love it if people did was tested out the question box. I don't have any experiments here. So the question is, what do you want to get out of today's webinar? Is there any specific questions you guys have? As with all of our webinars, we are trying to make this as interactive as possible. Awesome, we're getting some answers back. So for anybody that just joined, we had a bunch of people just join in the last minute or so. As you're joining, please take a moment to fill out the poll that is on there. So how often or how do you currently determine your content marketing plan? You don't create any content today. You're mostly guessing based on the knowledge of your industry. You sometimes use data from public sources, such as Keyword Planner. You use analytics, you use audience research and third-party data. It looks like we have an actual even split, so would love your answers there. And then the second request as people are logging on is if you have any questions, I would love somebody to test the question box that should be on your GoToWebinar to ask any questions that you might have that specifically pertain to your business. All right, let's do a quick mic check. Beth, can you hear me? Are you on?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Awesome, perfect. Thanks, Beth. Welcome, welcome. Paul, hey. Can you hear me? Let's do a quick mic check and make sure everybody can hear you.
Good afternoon, I can.
All right, it is afternoon, and let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Raj Kapoor, and I am the founder and managing director of And Marketing. And Marketing is an outsourced marketing department for growing companies. I am very grateful to be joined today by my colleagues, Beth McDonough and Paul Ferguson. Let me advance the slide there. Beth McDonough and Paul Ferguson. Beth is our content manager and head copywriter, and Paul Ferguson is our director of business intelligence and analytics. We are looking forward to a jam-packed 45 minutes for you guys. A couple of housekeeping rules. Everybody's on mute at the moment. So if you have any questions or comments, please use the question box and the chat box. We will respond to both of those. I'll be keeping an eye on both of those as Beth and Paul go through the materials. We have very few slides to kind of hit some high points, but this is a question-driven webinar. So as many questions as you have, I already see the first question. Thank you, Bryn, for asking the first question. I already see it. So as you ask questions, I'll find a good moment to interrupt. If there's something relevant that's happening in the chat, I'll interrupt the speakers and go through that. I'll give everybody a last minute to answer our poll question about what they're currently doing for their content marketing plan. Very interestingly, it looks like we have a pretty even split. More than half of our respondents are either not really creating content today or they're mostly guessing based on their knowledge. That's very common. I think what we want to do today is help paint a picture about how to use data from public sources, use analytics and other things like that to really advance and accelerate your content marketing plan. And it's a really interesting topic because we feel like there's a yin and a yang dynamic. And so in our little company, we have multiple teams, and Beth leads one of them and Paul leads one of them. And it's almost like this yin and yang. On one hand, you have the creative people who write wonderful words. They do a lot of branding and imagery and things like that. And that has a tendency to be thought of as, the fluffier or the touchier, feelier part of marketing. And then Paul runs our business intelligence group, and that's really data driven. And this is where we do our SEO, our email marketing, our analytics, our reporting, and those types of things. And that's considered a little more, on the data centric side. We think that content marketing is the best place to bring those two together. And quite often, that's really challenging for businesses to do. And it's especially challenging for growing businesses. So what I think today is going to be a really interesting discussion because it's bringing the two of these together. How do I use content, which needs to be emotional, it needs to tell good stories, it needs to do all the things that I said earlier. But if it's not grounded in solid data, is it really, really driving results for your business? So I think that's going to be a great kickoff. So I think we can go ahead and close the poll. And we ended up with 29% that do not create content consistently today. About a third are guessing based on their knowledge of the industry. About 20% sometimes use data from public sources. And then we have a few, about 15% of our respondents that always use analytics, audience research, and third-party data. It is a great mix, so we're really looking forward to it. Looks like we had a few people just join. If you just joined, please do use the question box as we get started. So if you have any questions, we want to make this as question driven as possible. But without further delay, I want to go ahead and hand the ball over to Beth to get started. Let me just advance the slide. Sorry, I'm dealing with multiple slides. I'm sorry. I'll just do the quick takeaways before letting Beth jump in. I apologize for that. So what are our goals for today? So the few goals that we have for today is number one, how to align your content strategy with your business goals. So quite often the marketers or the content people are 3 or 4 steps away from what the business is trying to accomplish. But the first piece of advice we have is to always understand what the business is trying to do and then align your content strategy to that. Number two, as I mentioned a moment ago, is really about data and how to align your content strategy creation and distribution grounded in data. And I think Paul and Beth are going to do a great job of covering that. And then the third one is just getting down to brass tacks and how to actually create the content that your audience is already searching for. So they're already actively searching on Google and other things like that. How do you create that content? How do you find that, find those keywords and things like that? So without further delay, Beth.
Okay, so this first one, this first step, determine your overall business goals. It might seem obvious, but your business goals are going to be the compass that's going to guide every other thing that you do. So you're kind of going to work backwards from the big goals that you set with like the other executives, the C-suite members of your company, and so you're not spinning your wheels trying to figure out what metrics you're reaching. So think about what your newspaper headline is, whether it's a year from now, 5 years from now. Further than that, what do you want to be known for? What is that big pie in the sky goal that you're trying to reach? Are you trying to reach a new demographic, right? So if you know that you're trying to reach maybe a new group of people who are, say, 65 years old or older, you're probably not going to want to focus content on Instagram, TikTok, places where those people aren't spending time. Are you trying to launch a new product or service? Are you trying to generate traffic to a new website, or are you selling maybe through e-commerce for the first time? A lot of people are doing that right now because people are spending a lot of their time shopping online instead of shopping in person because of the pandemic. And or are you trying to educate people on a felt need because you're trying to market a product or service that maybe people don't know they need yet? So set those business goals, decide where you want to be, and then those will guide every content decision that you make from here on out. And when you're determining how your content marketing will impact those goals, that's where you're going to say, okay, where are my people spending their time? What am I trying to do? Do they need to learn about me? Do they need to learn what my product is or what my service is? Do they even know why they need my product or service? What is the goal that you're trying to reach? And then work backwards with your content to make sure that people know who you are and how to get your product or service. And then I'm going to pass it to Paul for the next 2 bullets.
Yeah, so how does data and analytics kind of play into everything that Beth just mentioned. As the survey just said, too often marketers are creating content just kind of to create content. They don't really have a good understanding of how that plays into their overall goals or how data plays into that as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's extremely common. But the wonderful thing about digital marketing is it gives us a wealth of data, and we're able to actually use that data to create better content that will help us meet our goals. So as Beth mentioned, content's wonderful for organic, but at the same time, you have to understand, is that organic traffic going to help you meet what your end goal is? For example, at AM Marketing, whenever we do any content ideation or brainstorming or calendars, we always forecast out and project the amount of traffic we expect a content piece to get based on its ranking on Google's first, fifth, and 10th position. It takes a while to get to that point with content. It takes 3 to 6 months to rank organically, but we are able to at least know through the common click-through trends on Google how much traffic we would receive for that particular content piece based on our targeted keywords. Additionally, we will also, if it's a bottom funnel piece of content, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we're able to determine how many leads that content piece will be able to give us based on our organic conversion rates. So now at least we, before we even create any content piece, we have benchmarks and we have goals set up to say we want to achieve this much traffic and achieve this many conversions. Of course, none of that matters unless you have a in-depth and reporting measurement structure. So when we also create our content calendars, we also determine what are the things that we want to measure on and how are we going to measure it. So again, with content, it's all about how many people are going to see it, and then if it's a lead generation piece of content, how many leads are we going to get from that content piece. So some of the things that we look at are form fill outs, goal conversions, assisted conversions, traffic, how many people see that month over month over month, and then rankings for overall key terms. All of this data helps us decide, is this content piece working? How do we pivot to make it better? And then how do we move forward and use that data to create even better content pieces going forward?
Perfect, Paul. We are getting a few questions in. So first question is actually for both of you. So we got a question, are blog posts still relevant beyond SEO? I will take that question first, and I will say they are absolutely relevant beyond SEO. So they are certainly relevant for SEO because you want those keywords to show up on your website, but it will determine if you are doing your blog posts correctly. You will have people come, you will have people read the content because they are receiving value from it, and then you can use that blog post to convert them. So you should have calls to actions and forms on your website, on your blogs, that engage people to either take a further step within your process or to actually convert right there, give you their information, and have you reach out to them. Paul and Beth, what would you add to that? Anything?
I would add, so absolutely, yes, you're building trust with this content, right? People aren't going to learn how to trust your authority and trust what you have to say and connect with you if you're not putting that kind of content out. And the second thing is, if you're writing blog posts, which you should be, make sure not to underutilize them because you can repurpose them into all kinds of different content. Your blog posts will inform the emails that you send to your audience. You can pull snippets from them for social media posts. You can make infographics out of them. There's so much, work smarter, not harder, right? There's so much content you can pull from those blogs and use in so many different marketing channels to reach your audience and to convert them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul, let me just interrupt and ask a question. Maybe you can combine these because another question just came in. You mentioned specifically gathering data and organic data. What are some resources you can get that data? And then certainly please address the is a blog still relevant question.
Sure. So the resources that we use at End Marketing to gather data are Google Analytics. Everyone should have Google Analytics. If you don't have Google Analytics on your site, it's free. Please let us know in the comments. We will set that up for you for free now because it takes like 10 minutes, so it's not hard. So we definitely use that. That's our main driver. Secondly, we use SEMrush, which is sort of free, but we have a subscription there. That gives us a good sense of keyword volume, search volume, some of our competitors' keywords volume. You can also use Google Keyword Planner, which is another great free resource. And then we use a couple paid options like GetStat, which shows us some trends, as well as people also ask for certain terms and related searches. And then just going back to the blog post question real quickly, Raj sort of touched on this a little bit. I look at blog posts as the top funnel content piece. That's the awareness piece. That's where you're actually driving. Think about your customer journey, your user's journey. You want to educate people about why they have a problem or what's going on with their problem and how can they solve it. Blog posts are perfect for that. And then as they go down the line a little bit, you can get into ebooks or infographics or case studies, tools, calculators, things like that. So
great. A couple more questions have come in, but I'm going to go ahead and advance this slide because I think they're better. One of these is already covered, and we want to hit another one. So, yeah, please go ahead.
You want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Beth.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. That's okay. So using data to create your content marketing plan. This first step, performing your research, is so important, and it is the step a lot of businesses and organizations skip because we already think we know what our target audience wants to receive from us. We think we know what they're looking for and what information we should give them. And so if you think that, you might be wrong, and if you don't know, then this is a great place to find out. So you want to perform research that looks at audience behavior. You want to know what pages on your website your audience is interacting with the most. So what's your most popular existing content or your most downloaded piece of content? What's your most popular website page people are visiting? What are they engaging with that you already have available? And you're going to want to do research on keywords. So the keywords are the terms that your audience is already searching for actively. They're trying to solve a problem, right? When you go to type something into Google, a lot of times you're saying, what is this? Or how to this? Or how does this? Why does this? You're usually asking for a question because people are trying to solve a problem. And so you're looking for what they're asking because you want to solve that problem for them. What are their related searches? So sometimes we think people are typing a certain combination of words or asking a certain question, and there might be something similar, but it's different phrasing that people are searching for. And what are people also asking that are related to those topics? And then when you look at those search terms, and you can look and see what type of content is already ranking well, so that you know what people are wanting to see, because those are the results that Google is going to give. And you want to create better versions of that content so that you can get people's eyes on your content instead of theirs. And that goes into doing your competitor research, right? So what keywords your competitors outrank you on? What's getting them more traffic than you? What pages on your website, what new content pieces on their website generates the most views, and then you can decide how to compete with that and make a better version of it.
Yeah, and just to kind of supplement what Beth said there, is particularly with competitors, one of the things that we look at a lot is what keywords are our competitors outranking us for? And then we determine, is that A, important for us to rank for? B, what kind of digital share can we get out of that? Is it a difficult keyword to rank for? Is it something that's valuable for us? Will we create a valuable piece of content for our audience that will get us actual leads or more sessions? So really understanding what our competitors are doing, not better than us, but they're just focusing differently than us, is important for us to drive our content strategy.
Hey, Paul, let me interrupt with a question, because I think there's two questions, and I think they have a common thread. It's really around marketing terminology. So one of the things we pride ourselves on, we like to really speak clearly in plain English. So the two questions we got are, there was a couple terms you used, which certainly I know, but I'd like you to address. You said bottom funnel and top funnel content. So first of all, explain those. And the second one was around content traffic and forecasting. You mentioned looking at Google ad traffic on the 1st, 5th, and 10th slots. What does that mean? I couldn't quite understand it. Can you please just elaborate? So can you grab those two?
Sure. So much like a sales process, content follows a funnel process, right? The top funnel is awareness. It's creating awareness around a particular issue or subject. The second middle funnel is actually probably the hardest funnel. That's kind of educating people about how you can solve that problem. And then the last bottom funnel is conversion. So that's testimonials. That's telling people that you want, this is how you solve it. This is why we're the best choice to solve it. So the bottom funnel content is extremely important for all of your lead generation. But thinking about your own journey, whenever you do any research on anything, the first step is usually more of that high level awareness. Okay, what is this? The second step is how do I solve it? And the third step is who can solve it for me? And then in relation to the first, fifth, and 10th slot of Google, as we all know, there's 10 organic search positions on each page of Google, right? So each one gets a certain amount of traffic. The first slot, I think, is estimated to get 37.5% of all clicks. And then, of course, that goes down as you go through 5 and through 10. Does anyone really go on the second page of Google? About 83% of all people stay on the first page, but yeah, so no one ever goes past the second page. So we really don't care much past the top 20.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you. I was just doing through that. And in the meantime, a question just came up. I think this one's better for Beth. So Beth, the question is, when you're creating your content, what do you actually write about? What do you want to, how do you determine what to talk about, what to write about?
Yeah, so when you're doing that research and you are digging through and finding those keywords that people are searching for, you want to position yourself to solve the problem or answer the question they're asking, right? So say you sell vegan cheese, and maybe the question is, what kinds of cheese are vegan, right? Somebody's asking, like, they're vegan and they're saying, what kind of cheese can I eat, right, if I'm vegan? And so you want to create a piece of content that tells them what kind of cheese they can eat, and then maybe you're going to offer them also a resource that they can download or a way to get them onto your email list, so then you can nurture them through your funnel. And you want to make sure they know that you have vegan cheese available for them if they are looking for that to purchase.
A good fun free idea to do for content ideation is called Google Suggest. So it's when you type in Google search bar, just type in vegan cheese and then type in the letter W and see what comes up. That's Google suggesting topics that people have already searched for. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to determine. One of the things we do actively for ourselves and for our clients is we will take those people often ask, or the keyword information that Beth just talked about, or the one that Paul just talked about, we'll actually make that the blog title, or we'll make that the ebook title. That way we know people are looking for it. We'll make that the title of the blog, because if that's something you're looking for, you're much more likely over time to rank highly. Just got a question related to the vegan cheese comment you made. Somebody's asking, as you give examples, can you think of examples for both professional services or other services and tangible products? So you brought up a vegan cheese example. So Barbara's question here, I'll actually answer it, then you guys can chime in. It's really not different. So yes, there are differences in the business model, but for when people are searching for tangible product solutions, even if it's consumer or business to business, versus professional services, which tends to be more business to business, the search behavior is the same. What I like to say is that they're all humans. Everybody uses Google. Not everybody, but most people use Google. And they're doing that whether they're looking for their local pizza shop or their best vegan cheese, or if they're looking to buy a new computer system or hire a consultant, or look for a doctor or something like that. So it really isn't that different. You've got to think about what that person is looking for on Google, or what problem they have. I'd love it if Paul or Beth, you want to elaborate on that one.
Yeah, real quickly, a great resource is your sales team. I know a couple of the people online right now are former coworkers of mine. So we did professional services for schools, facility services for schools, and we tried to create a B2B content strategy around what they would be searching for. So the best source of information at first is always going to be your salespeople, because they're feet on the ground, they're interacting with the customer's telling them all the time what they're looking for, and that's a great starting point. And then you can start doing your data and your research around those terms.
Yeah, I would just add, regardless if you're B2B or B2C, think about who your decision maker is, right? If you're B2C, your decision maker is someone who's going to go purchase product. If you're B2B, your decision maker is probably someone on the executive level, or maybe it's your CMO or your salesperson, whoever that is. Regardless, they're still online searching for an answer to their problem. Like, say you sell cybersecurity services to businesses. They're going to realize they need different cybersecurity if they're being hacked, or if they're at risk of being hacked, or if people are Zoom bombing everyone while everybody's at home having conference calls, right? You realize that you have a problem and you're looking for the solution to that problem, whether it's a tangible product or a service that their business needs to.
Great, perfect. We get through this. Should we move to the next slide here, Paul? I think that's your next slide.
Sure.
Oh, we skipped the messaging. We
Oh,
want
I'm
to go
sorry.
back.
Go ahead. My apologies. My apologies.
So after you perform your research, you want to determine your messaging and your brand voice. And the importance of this cannot be overstated. We spent a lot of time going over this in a meaningful messaging specific webinar that we did a few weeks ago. So you can find that and listen to it on our website. I think we did link to it at the end of this presentation as well if you want to revisit that. But I'll just do pretty high level. We use an adapted version of Donald Miller's Building a Story Brand Framework. Excellent book and resource if you guys have not read or listened to the webinars or the podcasts from him already. But the biggest takeaway from that is pivoting your brand to be your hero's guide instead of the actual hero. So think about it. Let's use cybersecurity again as an example. A lot of businesses present themselves as the ones who are saving the day. So they're saying, let us save your business from being hacked. That is positioning your brand as the hero. And your audience doesn't want to have to compete against you because they want to be the hero of their own story. So instead of saying, we'll save your business from being hacked, you should say, we will help you save your business from being hacked, because your audience, your potential customer, should be the one who gets to be the hero and who is the superstar in your story. And then when you think about yourself as the guide and you're creating your content, you want to always focus on building trust, and you're going to do that through empathy and through authority. So you want to create content that makes it clear that you understand what your audience's problem is, you get how they feel. You want to connect with them by saying, you know, I've been there, I get it, I know you're probably experiencing this or feeling this. And then authority. So that's testimonials, that's experience, that's success stories, case studies. You've done this before and you know what you're talking about. And then third component to that is really nailing down your personality as a guide, like your brand voice, because it's really important when you're creating content to strike a tone that your audience is going to relate to and is going to trust. If you are a cybersecurity company, you probably don't want to speak in the same voice as you would if you were a spa owner, right? You got to think about what kind of tone, what kind of language your people are going to trust. You know, if some people are super playful and they curse in their web copy, or they use emojis, or whatever that may be, and you have to think about what's going to work, because is that going to turn off your audience, or is that going to build trust with them to have a more serious tone or a silly tone? I'll pause there before content plan.
No, it's great, Beth. I'll give the specific framework that we use. So the framework that we use most often for the actual brand personality and brand voice exercise is called the 12 brand archetypes, or the 12 brand voices. There's a lot of great frameworks out there. You can Google the terms I just said and check out what those 12 brand voices or brand personalities are. We actually have an exercise we take our clients through to help them determine what voice that is. And we find that when we layer that with the adapted version of the story brand framework, it really drives powerful results, because not only does it refine the message, it refines the message in a very specific tonality to that business. So that's really good. I'm sorry, Beth,
yeah,
if I could
do a primary and a secondary, because a lot of brands want to be unique and kind of go against the grain, but usually if there's an overarching tone that most competitors have, it's for a reason. Maybe if they're not being silly or sarcastic, it's because that audience doesn't trust that kind of personality. So you can work that in a little bit to have your own spin on it if that's your secondary brand personality instead of your primary, for example. And then once you have your research done and you have your messaging ready, so you know what you should be talking about and how you should be saying it, you want to create a content plan, because as we all know, great ideas don't go anywhere if we don't actually have them planned ahead of time and have everything all laid out. So the best way to do that is to create a comprehensive marketing calendar, a content marketing calendar. We have an example of one on the last slide that you can reference just to see what the structure looks like. And that's where you're going to log all of your content topics, your titles, the type of content, because this doesn't just encompass blogs, right? This could be a video series you're doing. It could be an infographic. It could be an ebook or a one-page download, anything like that. The funnel location it falls in, the keywords you're focusing on so you can reference them and make sure you're using them enough. And if you have more than one segment, audience segment, then which one you're trying to reach specifically with this piece of content. Give all that in the same place, give yourself due dates, give yourself publishing dates, log where and how you want to distribute it so you can track all of that, and then it's so much easier to hit those benchmarks and then track the success along the way.
Perfect. You got a couple questions in here. I think the first one is for you, Beth. So how often should, when you're writing a piece of content, how often should you use the keywords you just talked about? So you do the research, you get the keywords. The question here is actually about what's called keyword stuffing, which is a little bit of jargon. Maybe you can explain that as well. But the question is, how often should I use it, and when will it be considered keyword stuffing?
Yeah, so keyword stuffing, you can tell when you see it. Usually sometimes it's even, bots write content these days too. And it's when you're just trying to get a keyword in there a certain amount of times, and it doesn't matter if it reads well or if it makes sense. They're just trying to hit those Google benchmarks. So you're literally just stuffing keywords in there wherever you can. Most experts on SEO believe that the ideal keyword density falls around 1 to 2%. And so that means that your keyword should appear 1 to 2 times per 100 words, because that shows Google or whatever your search engine is that you understand your topic and they understand what your piece of content is about. Another way you can kind of work that in is using your keyword in like the H2 headers in your piece of content. So, and balance that with headers and within the body of your content. And then the closer to the top of the content, like above the fold, that you can start using it, the better, because that's where it's going to grab with your audience and the search engines. Paul, I'm sure you have something to add here too.
Yeah, no, you actually hit the nail on the head. The only other thing to think about when you're creating your content, and Beth sort of alluded to this, is just the technical SEO aspects of it, right? So on the back end of your site, you want to make sure your H1 tags have the focus keyword in there, your meta description has the focus keyword in there. And then also one thing that a lot of people neglect is your overall URL structure. In most cases, the title is probably not the best keyword rich title. So in most cases, a website will take that title and be the URL structure. We at Marketing always try to put in our focus keywords within our URL structure to help us rank higher.
That's great. Anything else on this one, or should we move to the next slide, Beth?
I'm good.
All right. Go ahead, Paul.
So you've done all your research, you've created your plan, you've gathered all your data, you've created your forecasts. Now what do you do? It's time to execute out on your content plan. And how do you use all of that data to execute out on a blog post or a content or an ebook or an infographic? Well, it depends on whether you're a one-stop shop, whether you're using an agency, or whether you have a content team. But the first step, and Beth, please feel free to jump in on this, is always to outline out with your subject matter experts using the data that you have. That's something that we always do here at Marketing. Beth and our other content writer, Emily, are great writers, but oftentimes whenever we come up with blog posts, they're asking Raj or other team members, how do we want to position this? How are we going to use these keywords? What is the thought behind it? So once we actually build out that outline and write it all out, then it's time to host it and promote it. Beth, is there anything that you wanted to add to that? That's kind of the process that we follow, but I know that you may have a couple thoughts to that.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of general writing tips. You think back to those essays you probably had to write in high school, and so you have your intro, you make 2 to 3 points, unless you're doing a listicle, then it might be more than that, and then you have a conclusion. And I believe there's recent research that says our attention span online is like 7 seconds per web page. It's like the equivalent to a goldfish now. So the quicker you can grab someone in the beginning and get across the point, keep your goal in mind, right? What's your goal with that content piece? Do you want them to download something? Do you want them to buy something? What are you trying to teach them? So try to capture them as early as you can. And a lot of writers who are used to writing like maybe print content or more academic content, or even like freelance articles, make the mistake of not shortening paragraphs enough, right? We're taught in school that paragraphs should be like a certain number of sentences. And when you're reading online, especially on mobile, people just don't have the focus for that. So even if it's the same amount of content, chop it up, shorter paragraphs, balance short and long sentences. Just you have to really try hard with digital to make sure that you're holding people's attention the whole time.
Right, and after it's been created and executed and posted on your website, the one thing that we mentioned earlier is once you build it, people will come, but eventually. It takes 3 to 6 months for you to rank significantly through organic or through organic content. So how do you get more people to actually see your content and push it out and promote it a little bit more? Well, that's where inbound and outbound marketing actually come into play. And this is where your data on your audience and your research on your audience is super important. Inbound marketing is typically organic search, SEO, retargeting, things like that. It's a great thing to have. You should always have content on your site. If it's downloaded content, like an ebook, make it gated because people will give you their contact or their contact information, and now you have new contacts. But again, that can take some time. So that's where outbound marketing comes into play. That is email marketing. We do a lot of email marketing and marketing. It's content, as Beth mentioned earlier, is perfect for your newsletter or a featured content email. It's a great way to get your existing audience to see your content and engage with you. Social media, Beth also mentioned earlier as well. You can cut up bits and pieces of your content and put that on your social media and promote it through there to get people to drive back. Another great thing about Google Analytics is you can create audiences based on the content that people consume. Why is that important? Well, that's for Google Ads or digital advertising, because you can retarget specifically to people that have consumed certain pieces of content and drive them back to whatever page that is most relevant to them. Raj, I see you snickering. Do you have any questions or things to add in that?
And Paul, I think the steam is going to come out of your ears because it's two questions I'm going to combine. The first is a great question, Barbara. Thank you for asking it. How often should I blog? But the correlated question is it still effective to email my customers? And I just can't imagine a better person that I know.
That's like laughing.
I was laughing when I saw this because just to be very clear, email is not dead. Bad email is dead. We all get too many emails. We all acknowledge it. And what I like to tell people before Paul jumps in, because he's the one who's taught me more about email marketing than anybody, and he's changed my mind on the topic sincerely. Think about a company or a person or a provider that sends you an email that you read almost every time. And just think about that. And then literally write down the characteristics of what makes that email interesting. The example I like to use when I still went to meetings and things like that and had to buy dress shirts is a company called Charles Tyrwhitt, right? They do a great job. They target me very specifically. They have really good shirts that I like, and I like the price, and I like everything about the brand. So it's a great little plug for them. But what they do when they email is that they're completely relevant, they're humorous, they have deals, they have engaging content, and they make me sort of, I like as a marketer that they get me. So I read almost all the emails that I receive from them. So when you write down those characteristics that they're engaging, they're interesting, they get you on all those types of things, go be that. Now think about the things you think of as spam. They're junk mail, they're salesy, they're too pushy, they don't add any value, they sell, or they spam. Don't do those things. And that is the difference between really bad email marketing and really good email marketing. Paul, I know you're dying to add something to that, so please do.
Yeah, we could do a webinar on email marketing alone, but the one thing I will add to that is email marketing is still the highest marketing channel for return on investment. By far, it's still the most relevant. So good email marketing will drive more leads, more sales than any other marketing channel in the world for you. So that's important to mention. I also, as Raj mentioned with Charles Tyrwhitt, he is a segment. It's very important to segment out your audience to make sure they're getting the most relevant emails. So that's why, as we do our data in terms of our content, and that's why we build audiences that consume certain pieces of our content, we now know who is most interested in a content marketing email versus a business intelligence email. And we send them the most relevant emails we possibly can. And the last thing I'll mention just on email in general is design. Too often people use templated designs from MailChimp or Constant Contact or whatever, and they don't stand out at all. Much like direct mail, which another hint is still not dead. You have to win the mailbox for direct mail. You have to win the inbox for email marketing. Everyone that I know and everyone that I've talked to will always stop and look at a nicely designed email, even if it's 2 seconds before they delete it. They at least stopped and looked at it. So the content is extremely important, but so is the design.
I'll add just something real quick, if that's okay. And I know I think I mentioned this in another webinar before, but your email is the only distribution channel you have control over. You can't control whether you can work really hard on SEO and you can pay for advertising, but you can't control whether Google shows your stuff on the front page, right? I mean, you can do certain things well. You can't control the algorithm and how often it changes on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. You can control your email because someone has signed up to receive content from you. And that, I think, especially in this day and age, is a really big deal. That means they're already a fan and they want to hear what you have to say. They want to see your content because they're probably ready to buy from you at some point if they haven't already. So they're already like your most existing raving fan. So don't be afraid to talk to them because they gave you their email address because they want to hear from you, and those are the best people for you to be talking to.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I'm sorry, on that, that's a great point, Beth. There's a great book by Seth Godin called Permission Marketing. They have given you permission to market to them, so you should absolutely do so in a relevant way.
The flip side of that is don't violate that by not adding value, not giving them what they want. That's when people get dissatisfied and click the spam button. That's your opponent in this. And I think the answer to the other question that I buried within the email marketing one was how often. So the question is, how often should I blog an email?
Beth, I'd love your perspective on this. There's no tried and true formula that says you should do it once every month or twice a month or whatever it may be. It's really just how often does your audience engage with it? And every audience is different, right? So, or also, I mean, a lot of content is also going to be newsworthy and relevant, right? So there could be, we're going through a little bit of a crazy time right now. So there's a wealth of content being created, probably more often than most marketing departments are doing it. So, or had done in the past. So there's really no specific answer. It should be consistent though. That's the most important part.
Yeah, I would just add that it depends a lot on how often they're already used to hearing from you, right? If you never email your list, you probably shouldn't start emailing them every single day. A great rule of thumb to start with, if you don't already email your audience frequently, is to just, shoot to publish like at least 2 content pieces a month. Once every 2 weeks, so be consistent. Maybe it's every other Friday. And then at the end of the month, wrap it all up and send that in an email as a monthly newsletter to your audience. And then if you're already doing that and you want to email them more often, just make sure you always have something to say, right? So if you want to email your list once a week and they like hearing from you, just make sure that you have something relevant to say once a week.
I think I unmuted instead of muting, so forgive me for that. For people, and I know the person who asked this question is a relatively small business, I think the minimum just to get started is 2 blogs and an email. Every month, get into the rhythm of doing that. And so for much smaller businesses, that's a great place to start because that's easily accomplishable. It's predictable, exactly the model that Beth sort of said, I think is a great place to start. For much larger companies, and there's a couple of multi-$100-million company people that work on that are on this. If you've been doing it for a long time and you have a really large list, you have the right to email people multiple times a week with really good content because you have the infrastructure, you have the resources to do it, and your audience is big enough that they're actually going to go respond to it. What I would encourage you to do is you don't always have to have fresh content in every single email. You can have a little bit of repetition, but make sure you have enough content so that if somebody reads it multiple times, they do see it as fresh and is very interesting, okay? And just as we pause, we have, I think, one more slide of content. And no, actually, I think we're pretty much done with the content. I want to leave it to Paul and Beth to wrap up. This is going to be a last call for questions. We have about 6 or 7 questions already to recover. So we're going to keep going until we answer all the questions. But I encourage everybody to do a last call on questions. And you can ask anything you want. And then Paul, Beth, and I will stay on and continue to answer questions, okay? So anything else, Paul or Beth on this slide?
I think we're good. I mean, obviously the optimize your content plan, rinse and repeat, that all ties into the metrics and the business goal that you laid out in the beginning of this whole process. So we review all of our content pieces once a month within a spreadsheet. We review what our targeted keyword is, whether we're improving our ranking or not improving our ranking. These are all the foundation for future business decisions within our content plans.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Great. So again, we're going to stay on and answer some questions here, and I think they'll be relevant. It'll be a great discussion. But everybody who attended this webinar is going to receive an email with feedback. We love your feedback. We've actually changed the way we do webinars based on that feedback to make them much more interactive, much more questions-based, much less content up front. We're happy to do an individual consultation with anybody here. It's kind of sort of a no strings attached kind of a conversation. If you go to the link that you have right there, it's andmarketing.com/content or contact, excuse me, or shoot me an email. Give me a little context about what you want, because if you have a data analytics heavy question, certainly happy to put you in touch with Paul. If it's really about storytelling, we'll put you in touch with Beth. If it's about branding, we'll put you in touch with our creative director or anybody else on the rest of our team. So please give us a little bit of context. We did just recently publish an ebook that is complimentary. It is at this link here. It's called Cut the Fluff. So if you can notice a pattern in what we're talking about, when you're actually building your content, it shouldn't be just fluffy. It should be emotional, it should be powerful, but it really should be grounded in data. So how to create content that actually grows your customer base. You can download that ebook at that link, and it's also available at our website. Now let's go through a few more questions, because there's a bunch of them. One just came in, and this is from somebody who is just starting to build out their content strategy and lead generation function, okay? And they're doing it on a quote unquote limited budget. This question we get all the time. What are the tools that you would recommend to be the most impactful from analytics to get started?
Yeah, I think we addressed a little bit about this earlier in the call. The first and the most important is Google Analytics, right? That gives you all of the data that has happened on your website since the day that you actually implemented the code on for Google Analytics on there. So that's your starting point, right? That's going to tell you what people are viewing on your site, how long they're spending time on those pages. Hopefully you have some goal completion set up that'll tell you what's driving which, what goals and conversions, what content is driving that. So that's your starting point. Secondly, we use SEMrush, which is a great tool. It allows us to see what our competitors are ranking for, what pages are driving the most traffic for our competitors. That's super important for us, because that tells us, okay, this is the content that our audience that we know is consuming from our competitor. How do we take that away from them? And then lastly, we use a couple of different tools like GetStat, which is a paid tool, which gives us a whole wealth of information for any of our targeted keywords, such as people also ask questions, related search, top 20, which is extremely important for us to see what are the top 20 URLs and companies that are ranking for each and every one of our targeted keywords. We target hundreds of keywords, so that's to be able to have that at scale is extremely important. And then just the way that we mine that data, we use Power BI. We align all of our paid data, social data, sales data, Google Analytics data all into one dashboard, and we're able to, even competitor data too, and we're able to make quick decisions about what content is ranking, what we should be creating, what other insights are we seeing. Hopefully that answers the question.
Beth, I know you know about a lot of tools. One that we've used before is actually a free tool. So Paul described the first few that he described were inexpensive, and I'll put them here in the questions and answers. He also talked about GetStat and Power BI. I would also add to this list for sure Ubersuggest. So Neil Patel is a pretty well-known digital marketer that we certainly follow, and Ubersuggest does a great job of talking about those. Beth, would you add any of those? I know you have a ton of them.
I would just build off of Ubersuggest by saying that they launched a Chrome plugin that's free just a few weeks ago. So if you add the Chrome plugin, when you type something into Google, it will give you the search volume, the all those metrics right on the front face of Google when you do that. So that's pretty useful if you have little to no budget. Ubersuggest does have a paid subscription too if you want to, because I think you get like a certain number of searches or certain dashboards available if you use the free version of Ubersuggest. And then it's not necessarily for gathering analytics, but when you're scheduling content out, I would highly recommend, not just popping in day of all the time and pushing content out, schedule it earlier, and you can use that. You can schedule content within your blog and your website. You can do your social through like Buffer, Hootsuite. Anytime you can automate that kind of stuff, it will serve you well, unless the pandemic starts, and then you would have to probably go backwards and take all your automations out and redo them.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Okay, a couple more sophisticated questions I think would be really good. So this one, I happen to know this business is much more technical in nature. And certainly we have some extremely technical clients. So maybe this question from Ben will be relevant. How do you identify the questions and responses for a specific demographic versus the general public? So his situation is that many of his keywords are searched by students and academics, but not, how do you parse out the potential customers that he might be trying to go after, or prospects, versus, you know, broader academia or students? Any ideas or advice around that?
It's a great question. One of the things that we always try to look into is search intent, right? Give you a good example. One of our clients is working within medical coding, and the term medical coding alone, when you look at the results that Google is throwing out in the top 20, all deal with classes, courses, jobs, not relevant to our business at all, right? I mean, of course we do medical coding, but we don't want to be targeting people that are looking for jobs or salaries or anything like that. So it's really about looking into what Google's ranking highly for your terms and determining what type of intent is around that. So I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but a lot of that is going to deal with the types of related searches that come with that term, as well as the actual content that's being ranked and the domains and the companies and things like that.
I think that's a great answer, Paul, because I think it does relate to this person's business situation. The other point that I would add is this is the really important part of just good old-fashioned primary research. And I know that's, you know, sometimes prohibitive, but somehow getting an understanding of your decision maker and what their behavior is and what are the questions that they have versus those other audiences. So jobs is a great example. You know, cost is another one that people may not be, you know, people in academia or students might be asking for. Those are the ones you want to try to avoid. The other answer I would give is that if you're in the thought leadership business, and we are all in the thought leadership business for the particular areas we are, I would consider it a really good thing that if people in academia or in the job market are ending up on my website consuming my content. It is not a short-term strategy, but those students and those professors or whoever those people might be could become our future customers. Those people could be the person that next refers us to our next client. And so it's just really important that as much as we like to operate with a sniper rifle and be really specific to manage our dollars, it's actually not terrible to have those other audiences engage, because those could be a long-term prospect or something like that. So in B2B audiences, I find that to be true as well. Beth or Paul, anything to add there?
I would just say, I mean, you can also get sort of psychological with it too, right? Because it's not, I mean, it's database, but it's also, there is some gut that has to do with it. So when you're thinking about, you know, your hero, think about what keeps them up at night, right? What bothers them? What stresses them out? Like, why can't they sleep? So when you think about your person, and that's what, I know a lot of us hate Facebook now, but sometimes Facebook can be really good at that, because if we think about your target audience, what they might be interested in and what maybe pages on Facebook or brands on Facebook they already follow, then you can look at, you can get really granular with the activity that people are doing on Facebook and what kind of content they're interacting with on there, what pages they're following. And then, Paul, I've heard you talk about long tail keywords before too, and I think that might be relevant here.
Yeah, long tail keywords, there's gold in long tail keywords, right? Because though the search volume is extremely limited, the intent is high, right? So the longer tail keywords, the ones that have 4 or 5 or 6 terms within them, are highly specific to your business or your audience's questions and answers. So
great. So next question comes, again, somebody we know here. So what if people have not opted in to receive emails from you, but you have their email addresses because they work at a company you've partnered with or have done some other business with them? I think this is a question about opt-in and ethics. So Paul, maybe you're in the best position to answer that one.
Yeah, per cans allowed.
I'm sorry, Paul, your voice cut out and I think it was my fault. Can you just repeat your answer? That's my mistake.
Sure, yeah. Per can spam laws, you're technically not allowed to email anyone that has not given you permission to do so. However, I think we all know that that doesn't really matter because everyone ignores that. The idea is to not abuse that and make sure that you have a clear opt-out. I'm very rigid about the way that we email. Raj and I have had many fun conversations about it. I certainly would never advocate for buying lists or things like that even though people do that through Zoom info and things like that. But if it's someone that you know or someone that you got a business card from an event or something like that, then I don't necessarily see a lot of harm in sending the email. I just would not abuse it and send often.
I would always, the point I would add, so Paul's totally right. The point I would add to it is you have to always give people an option to unsubscribe. That is like an ethical breach if you don't, because if you keep spamming them, don't give them that, you will get sent to the spam filter and your email service provider will do something for sure, because sending spam is actually a violation of the law, as Paul articulated. Now, this is totally different for companies that operate under GDPR. So in the United States, we do not operate under GDPR at the moment. So I have a very Americentric response to this. If you are in Europe and you send an email where you don't have an explicit opt-in, you are violating the law, and that person could technically bring up charges. Now, what Paul was talking about on the Can Spam Act, the violation for that is not that great, and it's really hard to prove, and there's some things there. But when Europe went through and did GDPR, that changed the ballgame for European companies. So if you're emailing in Europe or you have clients in Europe or prospects, you have to be very careful about how you do that. So there's maybe a couple of tips there for that respondent.
I think sometimes people hesitate to make that unsubscribe option like as visible as it should be, but honestly, you should celebrate your unsubscribes, because if they don't want to hear from you, then why are you talking to them? So.
Absolutely correct, Beth. Absolutely correct. So a related question, again, I think, Paul, you're in the best spot to answer this one. Between Constant Contact or MailChimp, which email tool do you recommend? Or I'll just add, is there another one that you would recommend? And this is a smaller business, so keep budget in mind.
I would not use Constant Contact. Their functionality is limited. Their reporting is terrible. It's not one of my favorites. MailChimp is good. I've used a bunch. We have a client that uses iContact. I used to like them a lot, but their new platform seems a little bit difficult. Another really good tool is GetResponse. We use them at a prior company, and I love that platform. And then the one that I'm anxious to really try is Emma Email Marketing, not just because that's the name of my niece, but it's a beautiful platform. They offer wonderful templates, even that kind of stand out a little bit more, as well as their website is chock full of fantastic content. So I would recommend checking that out.
It's probably important to mention that MailChimp is, if they're a smaller business, MailChimp is free, I believe, to up to 2,000 subscribers.
Very true, but also you're very limited in what you can do in terms of templates when on the free account.
Great, thank you. And Paul, I appreciate your candor. You gave a clear answer. That's awesome. So next one is a B2B in nature, and this is I'm not sure who's better here. So when creating B2B content, do you send the content out to your B2B channels only, or to your B2C as well, since they are consumers too? So I assume that this is a product. I don't know this person's particular business, so I assume that this is a B2B and B2C company. I'm happy to start answering that question. So I think the answer is you've got to know your audience. So if you have a truly different value proposition and messaging and offer between B2B and B2C, you must segment them. So we work in the food business with quite a few clients, and they have a food service business versus their consumer outreach, and those must be completely different. So it depends on the nature of the difference between your customers. So this person's David. I want to make sure I answer your question. So it depends on how different those audiences are. You should have a different marketing strategy and a different plan, and therefore different messaging for both of those audiences. Beth or Paul, anything you might add to that?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add to that is it doesn't hurt to send a newsletter, a monthly newsletter, to everybody at the promoting your new content. From there, this is where reporting is extremely important. You can see who's clicking through, who's opening, and who's engaging with your website. I would recommend tagging each of your links with UTM codes from Google, and then you can build out those custom audiences from those click reports from your audiences within Google to specifically market to.
All right, last question. Oh, what a great question. I'll make this the last question. We are hiring someone else to do our content. How do we best work with them? How do you guys feel about that one?
Yeah, I would say, a lot of businesses are hesitant to outsource their content because they think like no one knows our product or service better than we do. So how could somebody else possibly learn the ins and outs of our business and what we offer and kind of how it works and who wants to purchase it? And I I would just say that that's a huge benefit that someone's coming in from the outside that might not already be close to your product or service, because you might be using, you can call it jargon, you can call it insider language, but you might be using a lot of terminology that might not be accessible or understandable to your target audience. So someone coming in with a fresh perspective from the outside to kind of say, hey, can we dumb this down a little bit? Or here's a question I would have if I were reading this, can really sort of like not just poke holes, but bring up perspectives that you might not think of because you're so close to it all the time. And when you're outsourcing that and working with a writer, they're going to dig in and do lots and lots of research. And so that's something that people within the actual business might not have the capacity to do on their own. So the writers will do their homework. And as long as you give them access to you to ask questions, to do interviews, to really get all the information that you have available, it's really exciting to kind of bring this to someone new who already has the writing skills in place and just has to kind of like breathe new life into the subject that you know about.
Yeah, Beth, let me use this as an opportunity to brag on you a little bit. So quite often our prospects will come to us and say, how can your writers know as much as I do about my industry? And that happens all the time with growing businesses, especially those who are more technical in nature. To be very clear, we take that as a personal insult and a challenge, right? So we do take the time to understand that. And that is where the advice I would give for anybody doing this is don't skimp on copywriters. Hire a really good professional one that will take the time to understand your brand, not just do a little bit of research and put together your words or rephrase your things that you're doing, but really take the time to understand your business, understand the strategy, understand how to put your knowledge into words, and maybe possibly provide a different filter that isn't encumbered by your technical knowledge or something like that. So that's what I would add to that. Paul, anything else to add from the data side about what you would expect, what you should expect from your content team?
The only thing that I would add is just it all starts with data, right? Beth and I were talking a little bit about kind of how this all works in a circle, right? Content drives everything, but you can't get all the great content until you do the data first, right? And it's all just kind of a circle. So make sure that you have all your audience research. Make sure you have all your web analytics. Make sure you're targeting specific topics and understanding what that will bring to your business and how it matches your overall goals.
Perfect. All right, folks. The next webinar we have is in about 3 weeks. I will be on the hot seat with my good friends and colleagues, Erica Quigley and Rob Pazesky. We are going to be talking about how to digitize your business post-pandemic. So Erica and Rob are operations performance professionals that are awesome at what they do. I will be talking about the sales and marketing aspect of digitizing your business. They will be talking about things like HR systems, CRMs, automation, all of the back-end systems that you could be doing. So if you have a question about digitization, the reason we brought this up, and specifically for post-pandemic, is because so many people are pivoting their businesses right now that where to start, what to do are very common questions that the three of us were talking about. So we decided to do a webinar about it. So please join us. The link is here. It's also on our website. We would encourage that. I apologize. We went a few minutes over here. We had so many questions. There's actually 6 or 7 that we didn't have the time to get to, but we will be following up with each of you individually. I thank you again for your awesome time, your attention, your great questions. Beth and Paul, great job. We really appreciate your expertise and taking the time to do this. Have a great day, everybody, and we appreciate you guys all logging in.
Thank you.
Be safe.